it would appear as though that the Muslim faith is quote unquote more complete when it comes to extremism than the Christian faith in Nigeria. It is simply because whereas the Christian faith makes a clear distinction in all of its doctrines between the state and religion, unfortunately, mainstream Muslim theology, not the Islamic faith, Muslim theology in Nigeria, does not make that distinction between the state and religion. In fact, there is no difference. Religion is the state, and religion should dictate the pace at which the state operates. Since the 70s, with the birth of Salafi Islam in Nigeria, whose doctrine, the doctrine of Salafi Islam, does not make a clear distinction between the state and the religion, and does not actually separate citizenship obligation and religious obligation. There has been a modeling up of what, as a citizen, you are supposed to do, your duty and loyalty to the state, and your loyalty to your nation state. This is the unfortunate situation we find ourselves. It is this religious extremism that actually birthed the Sharia movement in Nigeria in the 90s, which politicians took advantage of when we transited from military to civil democratic rule in 1999 to birth the Fourth Republic. A lot of these politicians campaigned and sought for power using religion as a tool to say, look, I'm going to impose in our respective states this much desired Islamic theocracy. And so we've seen from that point, a rollback on the freedoms, the unity, the convivial relationship between people of all faiths in Nigeria. When we were growing up, it has been almost eroded. In fact, it was the Sharia movement of the 90s and the implementation of Sharia laws in these states of northern Nigeria that actually served as a precursor for the Boko Haram insurgency as seen today. Now, the Salafi doctrine of Islamic theocracy, without which a Muslim's faith, a Muslim's religion is incomplete, is responsible for what you see today in the northeast and some parts of this country, where people are now trying to forcefully pull down the Nigerian state in order to erect an Islamic or a Muslim theocracy, because it has been preached, the ideals of an Islamic state, a Sharia-governed Islamic state, has been preached unchecked for more than half a century, beginning from the early 70s. These people purport to be acting in the name of Islam, but that is not the reflection of the true Islam. But again, it is a responsibility of members of the Muslim community to stop living in denial of this cancerous strain of religious extremism that has infected mainstream Muslim theology to such an extent that we are now rolling out a whole generation of radicalized youths that are willing to die in the jihad to install a Muslim theocracy over Nigeria. What Boko Haram is actually doing today is a war of secession by substitution. They want to substitute Nigeria's secular constitutional democracy with an Islamic theocracy, because for them is a religious duty. But somebody preached this ideal as a religious duty. It is still being preached today in all major centers of Islamic learning. And this is the challenge that Muslims must not take up. This same strain is as debilitating to Muslims as it is to non-Muslims, because fundamentally, people in this category do not consider other Muslims as true Muslims, and so they are fair game in this bloodletting orgy. And so we need to pay attention now and begin to reform Muslim theology. The mainstream, the ideology of Boko Haram is not a deviant ideology, unfortunately. It is in the mainstream. And I'll give you an example. A state like Kano today has become the poster boy of a theocracy within a secular constitutional democracy. Each time the state government of Kano purports to want to implement Sharia laws or apply sanctions for people that are violating Sharia law, they are violating the rights of citizens of Nigeria who reside in Kano, who are not Muslims. This in itself is driving radicalization, is driving extremism. So in essence, the Kano state government that we speak today, another Sharia implementing states in Nigeria, actually in the same league with Boko Haram insurgents. Ideologically, the operators of the state today appear or delude themselves really that they are benefiting from this system. But in the long run, if you look at experience of other countries, you realize that nobody's going to benefit from this system in the long run. And in fact, we are all going to be losers, because if the trend continues, this trend of intolerance and religious extremism continues in Nigeria, Nigeria might yield to the pressure of armed extremist groups that will actually, God forbid, take over the country. And so, if we do not tackle it now while we still have the time, if the state does not come in to regulate religious practices and preachings, which I've advocated for severally, in order to bring it in conformity with the laws of Nigeria, if the Nigerian state does not discourage, punish, and sanction purveyors of religious Islam or political Islam, or any form of religious encroachment upon the state affairs, if we do not actively discourage it, we're going to be losers at the end of the day.
Section 10 of the 1999 Constitution as amended states, Nigeria is a secular state. The government of the federation or that of the state should not adopt any religion as state religion. Why did I read this? I read this because Sharia, finding its way into our constitution, is a thing the government of the day needs to do something about, and urgently. In a state like ours, having two different laws is conflicting, and also it could be very, very injurious. For instance, we all know what happened to Deborah. In some quarters, it was justifiable, while in some, it was not. Absolutely unacceptable.